Hi, this is Teresa Nutt with the Center for Spirituality and Healing and the Integrative Health and Wellbeing Coaching Program. And today I want to talk about how the pillar of authentic communication that you've learned in the individual coaching model applies to the group coaching setting. There are two main objectives that we'll focus on in this short presentation. The first is how to apply the pillar of authentic communication that you already know in an expanded way that meets the needs of a group experience, and also how to build group synergy, because one of the beautiful things about all of the communication tools that you have is that it will help you build group synergy, which is really the benefit of having group coaching. So there are some key things underneath that objective, and they are: the coach is a role model, teaching participants how to step up and use basic coaching tools in the group setting, and avoiding and interrupting behaviors that interfere with authentic communication. So in the group setting, to me, the main thing to remember is that you are the example or the role model as the coach. So the stage that you set from the moment you initiate the coaching experience with your group will impact how the rest of your sessions go. So think of yourself you have to think of yourself, I would say, in two ways at the same time. You definitely want to be leading the group and having a strong presence. And at the same time, you have to set the example of sort of teaching in a very non-teachy way. Another way to say that would be sort of by example and weaving in some key things that you want your group members to start sort of doing on their own without realizing they're doing it. And some of those are helping people learn how to listen, to understand, and validate. Because most people will come to the group coaching experience with a history of listening to respond, listening to answer, listening to give advice, because that's what most of us are trained to do. So we in the coaching world have a different set of skills around listening, and it will be your job as the leader of your group to impart that way of listening. And you will do it again through weaving it in by example throughout the experience. The other is really how you practice curious inquiry and reflection in a way that moves the discussion forward. And again, this is role modeling. So people can ask a lot of questions or give a lot of advice, right? And you will see that happen in groups all the time. People will go to their default, wanting to drill someone with 20 questions. Why aren't you doing this? Have you thought about that? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which does not help the person and can even shut them down. So your job as the facilitator will be to help people, again, learn by your example how to ask questions that help the person get more in touch with themselves. So both the person asking the question and the person receiving the question have the chance to reflect more deeply. And as a result, everyone in your group, so those that are not perhaps participating in the communication at that moment, will get the experience of observing that interaction, and they will naturally start to emulate that behavior. That's really the ultimate outcome. And I just wanted to point out in this PowerPoint that, of course, the other three pillars are going to be mission critical to keep the flow of communication going. So if there's not sacred space, people are not going to communicate authentically. If you're not present and therefore sort of helping the group be present to one another, they're not going to show up the same way. So just think about that self-awareness, mindful presence, and creating safe and sacred space as part of sort of the backdrop and the structure of authentic communication. And I know we're trying to divide out pillars that really are so intertwined, but we want to just take the time to really help you maybe tease out some subtle nuances that will all come together as you do this work. And a reminder that one of the ways that you can help with authentic communication is to keep the focus on the positive and on the situation that is present. And I want to clarify what that means. So I am not saying that if someone's having emotions that are challenging, you're going to want them to have a sunny day, right? That's not what we're saying. What we are saying, though, is we don't want people to go down the rabbit trail of, this happened to me, I'm so hopeless, I'm so frustrated, and then they never move out of that place. So always think about, is this conversation helping things to move forward? And one of the ways that can help you with that is to focus on what's happening in the present moment. So if someone has a really long-standing stuck pattern, I think, for lack of a better way to say it, based on a lot of history, a lot of historical incidences, try and help them focus on what's happening in the present, what's happening right now, where are you at right now, what do you most need from the group right now, etc. So kind of keep it to that. And also, I would say that's the personal, you, the coach, with the person you are coaching in the circle. But it's also true for the other participants to be responding in that way to whatever is happening. So having another participant awfulize, or, oh, that sounds terrible, I can't believe it, kind of language, which is very common. It's what we do right in social settings when we want someone to know that we're really understanding them. But too much of that gets everyone sort of down in this lower egocentric mode of processing. And we want to help people move up. If you remember the transpersonal model, we want to help people sort of move up to that higher state of being where you're working at the more heart level and you're expanding you to your higher mind. So being able to not allow a person to sink too far into the weeds or go down a rabbit hole and sort of take the group with them is important. So if you need any clarification on what I mean, let me know. But I think you've all probably had the experience of one person in some kind of a group setting, whether it's a social setting or a work group setting, sort of take the whole experience down to a level of sort of doom and gloom and feeling really emotionally drained and stuck. And so your role as the facilitator will be to sort of not allow that to happen. And you do that by focusing on the present and focusing on how do we move this situation forward. And if a person is having challenging emotions, owning those emotions might be part of moving forward. But we don't want the entire group going down some spiral of having challenging emotions at the same time. That's probably going too far. So I hope that clarifies. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know, because this is sort of a very nuanced piece of information that's hard to portray exactly. And then I do just want to talk about how you as a role model can build group synergy, because with authentic communication, it's such a great skill set. There are so many tools in your kit that you already use in the individual setting. And so again, it's really expanding that into the group setting. So your job sort of, I think of you as a weaver, a weaver as the role model. So you're going to want to weave in reflective listening, curious inquiry, and other basic coaching tools that you used in the very beginning to sort of help get more self-awareness for you. So you're not going to teach them complex coaching techniques, right? You're going to start with the simple, basic things, and you're going to help them to override some of the common social communication behaviors that we all embody without training. Because basically that's the difference between you and them. You have training that helps you think differently about communication, and you get to weave that in so that you inherently are helping them improve their communication skills. So there's really some benefits to this group experience that are far beyond whatever goal they are working on. And sort of the side effect in a good way, and something to tune into, is that over time, you as the facilitator should be leading less and holding space more. Because over time, your group as the synergy builds, as people start to really demonstrate some of the basic coaching tools that they've learned through your example, you sort of get to sit back and watch the group orchestrate itself, and you're just conducting. So you're not doing all the leading and asking all the questions. You might ask some pointed questions, and you are definitely responsible for making sure the flow is there. But you can sort of let more people guide each other and sit in this beautiful space of the sacred container they've created together and all of the connections they're making, and allow them to sort of work within themselves with your support. So that's one of the good side effects. Again, we just like to bring this up. It comes up probably in every section only because it's so important. People are going to come in thinking that the writing reflex is the way to interact in this setting. And so it will be your job to help avoid the writing reflex and leading behaviors, because people are going to want to direct. They're going to want to give advice. They're going to want to fix whoever or etc. based on not having better information or background. So it is your job, and this might be hard for some of you, to be willing to interrupt some people as they're sort of doing some of that and really helping guide in a very gentle way back to a more sustainable space that is more inclusive, that is a little more compassionate, and that comes from a place of curiosity, from being present with yourself, etc. And then it's also your job, another way to build group synergy is to bring attention to shifts, emotions, and ahas that are happening. So you're going to hear and see and feel them early on in the experience. And you can say things like, boy, it seemed like that really resonated for you, or is it just me, or I really noticed that it feels like there's a shift for you, like your thinking might be a little different than it was before. So don't be afraid to, again, use the sort of subtle teaching moment to point out these things, because it helps inform your group participants of what to pay attention for. So you're sort of covertly, I think of you as a covert operative here, you're covertly teaching them these more subtle ways of communicating. And remember what we talk about way back when, listening between the words, under the words, around the words, all of that. So don't be afraid to highlight some of that. I heard you say this, but I also sort of felt you reflecting this. So is that true, or am I missing it? Don't be afraid to point out your intuition, your sort of sense of what's happening that's maybe in your body or in your, maybe you just hear words. However it happens for you, all of that is teaching material. And I think it's important to remember that this is sort of a spiritual principle. So I'm going out on a limb, but I think it's important. Sometimes we worry about, well, I'm only focusing on one participant, but generally in groups, as the synergy builds, what happens for one participant informs everyone, and that will happen more and more. So just sort of trust that inherently, a lot more than one person is being touched by whatever is happening in that moment. And the last is a reminder, weave in your expectations of how you want people to behave and operate. Weave in some basic coaching tools. Weave in sort of the attention to the things you want people to be noticing, so that you're slowly over time building their muscles around the communication skills that they probably don't carry around every day. And then, you know, I like to put in this slide about drawing a hard line. In other words, this is a reminder. Part of the authentic communication is you being willing to be real. So think, and I see I have a typo, think about your Enneagram time. I meant type. I'm smiling at my error there. But you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable redirecting people, interrupting gracefully, and tuning into the members of the group and working to meet their needs? Because you need to be doing all three of these through your communication. And so if you're Enneagram type, and not to overgeneralize, but if you know for yourself that you resonate with certain parts of your Enneagram type that make some of these things difficult, then just know those are your growth edges, and that's where you need to focus your attention. Because without doing these three things, redirecting, interrupting, and tuning into the entire group and sort of managing their needs, you are going to have a not as ideal experiences as you would like. And the last reminder is hold yourself as the leader. It can be easy, especially for certain Enneagram types, for certain personality types, to sort of sit back and see what unfolds. And you are holding space. You are the leader of the group. It's sort of like, in a way, you are the parent. You are not going to let the children run out in the street where there is fast traffic, right? So don't be afraid to have some sort of rules in the back of your mind. Of course, you're going to have group ground rules that you set up in the beginning, or agreements about how the time's going to be used. But you as the leader need to have in your mind, how am I going to know when things are going too far for one person and it's impacting the entire group? What am I going to do in that situation? How am I going to bring the group back? It's sort of like having some kind of internal red flag or pink flag alert system so that you remain in the position of power. Because once someone else sort of feels they can lead, it is very hard to course correct if you let that go too far. So trust your intuition when that little gut feeling or that little message you get in your head says something is not right. Tune in and ask yourself what you need to do to course correct. And the other thing is, don't let things go unspoken that are impacting the coaching space because you are uncomfortable. So if there's a dynamic between two participants, you can gently call it out in the group setting. Again, some language like, wow, I'm noticing some tension, or is anyone else feeling uncomfortable? Like, you can be very gentle about it, but just letting it go, not okay. So again, your job as the leader, you have to step up. You have to say what you're feeling, sensing, hearing, seeing that's impacting the group. So just wanted to reiterate those things. And that is it. If you have any questions, let us know in the share forum, because I'm sure if you have the questions, so do others. Take care.